What I'm about to share with you is the exact journaling routine I currently use that I have refined for myself over the last 15 to almost 20 years that has helped me go from being a completely lost drug addict at the age of 19 to going through law school, starting to work at one of the most prestigious law firms in the world, getting in the best shape of my life while preparing for a kickboxing fight while still working in this corporate law world. So this is a routine that helped me refocus my life and shape the reality that I wanted to live in. The mistake most people make with journaling is that they use it as a sort of brain dump. They just write down random thoughts that they had throughout the day, maybe a dream they had, and they use it as a tool to remember, as an external memory, which of course is fine. But if you use journaling properly, it is so much more. And this is going to sound very esoteric, but bear with me because I'm a very rational person, but I believe that we can bend reality. So when I speak of shaping reality, building the reality or creating the reality that you want to live in, what I really mean is bending reality in your favor. And we can do this with the power of intent. Very intentionally living, intentionally focusing our attention, intentionally focusing our energy. And I know this works because of my backstory that I'm going to get into in just a moment in a bit more detail, so you can understand how powerful journaling can be, how powerful the power of intent is. And this is in fact very similar with the concept of the law of attraction, which again is something extremely esoteric and most people misunderstand it, because what I see a lot of people believe in is literally, oh, I just have to wish for it and the universe will provide. But that's not at all how the law of attraction works, or what the idea of the law of attraction is. And let's not take it as this esoteric thing, but just as a concept. If you see the law of attraction for what it is, essentially what it means is that there are parallel universes, and in each of these universes there is a future version of you from where you are today. And through your intentionality, through walking a certain path, you will become one of these future versions of yourself. And whichever version that is already existing today and will materialize through the steps that you're going to be taking on a day-to-day basis. And through the steps that you take, through the imperfect actions that you take on a day-to-day basis, you will either become the version that you want to be, or at least get very close to that version, or you will become a completely different version and potentially be a lot worse off than you should be or than you could be. And before jumping into the educational part of the video, I want to leave you with a classical personal development concept, but it is very important to understand this. We start everything with thoughts. So getting crystal clear on our goal, our vision, the things that we're going to talk about in this video. This is where it all starts, the thoughts. From the thoughts come the words, what we speak, how we communicate with ourselves, how we communicate with others, how we speak with the world. From the words come the actions that follow what you say, what you do. Thoughts, words, and actions, these need to be aligned. And from the actions that you form, that you go through repeatedly, you will create habits. If you do an action on a day-to-day basis and you do it for a sufficient amount of time, typically 20 to 30 days, it will become a habit. And by creating habits, what you essentially do is you manipulate who you are, you manipulate your identity, because if you create something and it becomes a habit, that is essentially who you become. And that identity is the new you. This identity, by changing your identity, you will attract, you will bend reality to fit that person with that new identity. But in order to have that outcome, you need to become the person who has that outcome. So thoughts, words, actions, habits, identity, reality. That's how it works. Let's get straight into it. And this, by the way, is not something that I have come up with. I'm just condensing it in 10 to 15 minutes to share this, because this has helped me tremendously. It has completely changed my life. It has completely changed the path my life went. And without getting conscious of this, without making this part of who I am, I might be dead at this point, or probably in prison, one of these. So I'm extremely grateful to this process. I'm a big believer and I'm sharing this with as many people as I can. So if you find this helpful, leave me a comment, share it with other people, and let's crack into the educational part. All right, before going into all of the technicalities and the abstract art of journaling, I will briefly give you a little of my backstory because I want you to understand why I am such a firm believer in intentionally living your life. Why I believe that journaling can really be the key to changing your life, to bending reality in your favor, and to living any life you want, to living whatever you can possibly dream of. Yes, some things might be unrealistic, but they're usually only unrealistic because you're not willing to make the sacrifice and to do what's necessary, which, fair enough. But some things that you might want, that you think are outside of your reality, are simply a manner of having an intentional life. And I know this for a fact because this was me at the age of 19. I was completely fucked up. I was addicted to hard drugs without going into too many details. But I read a book that changed everything for me. At the time, that was before social media, before phone addiction. I barely slept most days, so I had a lot of time on my hands and I would read books. And somebody gave this book to me. I read it, and it was the seven habits of highly effective people, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And in this book, there was an exercise to think about who you want to become in life. What type of man or what type of person do you want to become? And I tried to really visualize my life, thinking about what other people would say about me at my burial ceremony. What would happen at the end of my life? Would people be proud of the person I was, of how I lived my life, of the person I have become, of the influence I had on others, the role model I was? I really asked myself this and tried to visualize it. And I was extremely honest with myself. I came to the conclusion that continuing down the path that I was on, here you can even see smoking. Yeah, just look at this. Completely fucked up. And I knew my current path would not lead me to the person that I wanted to become. So I wrote down who I needed to be if I wanted to be proud of myself when I'm old. And that for me was, I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to look and live like a Hollywood character, and I wanted to live a long and happy life. Back then, I also envisioned my life to have a family, which probably it still will have at some point. But I had this very clear vision. And this vision, as I already pointed out, can change over time. But if you had known that person at the age of 19 and that person had continued down the path that he was on, he would now be either dead or in prison. So I modeled myself after the character of Ryan Gosling in Crazy Stupid Love. And I thought of what I needed to learn and what I needed to change. I broke it down to skills, knowledge, things I could acquire, things I could learn, and I decided to take full responsibility for it. So the first thing I needed to do, and that might not have been the most obvious thing, but I needed to learn to organize myself because this guy had no idea how to get anything in life. So I needed to learn structure. Then step 2, if you've seen the movie Crazy Stupid Love, I needed to learn social communication skills. I wanted to be like this guy. I wanted to be the guy who was able to make other people like him, who was able to get the girl that he saw that he liked. I wanted to look great and have other people look up to me as a role model. So I broke it down into these elements and I decided to get to it. First thing I got clean. I applied to law school, which in Germany is university. So you go there when you're 19, you don't need to do anything else before. Started lifting. And to be honest, all of that wasn't perfect. I initially struggled to even get average grades because, of course, I came from being a heavy drug addict. My brain didn't work properly. And I had to learn how to actually use it, how to learn things. I had one thing that most people around me didn't have. I had already at that age a long-term vision. I had a plan to become that person. I had a plan to become this guy. That was a long-term plan. I had this vision and I was working towards it. So unfortunately, from that period, I don't have too many pictures, but I have a couple pictures. And this video is not about fitness, but I believe that our body is an expression of our mindset. So I will quickly show you my progress with a few of my pictures. This is after a few years of consistent training, I believe 7 years or something. I had struggled a lot to gain weight in the beginning because I'm really tall. I'm 195 centimeters and I initially weighed around 77 kilograms here. Here I had already gained around 10 kilograms, which was quite a struggle in the beginning, but I had a mission, right? I wanted to become this guy. So I figured it out. I tried a bunch of diets, did a bunch of stuff, eventually figured out how I could gain weight as a skinny guy. And to be honest, here, yeah, we can see it. I even got a bit fat. I weighed 110 kilograms, but I was proud of the weight I could bench, which, for us guys, that is always an important benchmark. And then I decided to cut weight, but I ended up being this dude. I was pretty much skinny fat for a long time. And at that point in my life, I had somewhat achieved that feeling. I had acquired those skills. I had organized myself. I had finished going through law school. I was already working at a tier 1 corporate law firm. I had gotten in pretty decent shape, but I somehow ended up partying again. I started doing drugs again. I was not a drug addict, but I was doing drugs quite regularly until I committed to finally get my life together again, pretty much for the second time. Now, of course, starting from a much better place. That was in 2024. I decided to get everything together. This is what I looked like about 2 months ago. So I'm pretty much in the exact shape that I wanted to be in. I'm clean, but I have the option, if I want, to live the celebrity lifestyle. I don't drink or do drugs. I still party on the weekends occasionally, but I do it completely clean. I have it under my control. And I also have the dream career that I wanted. I don't work 80 to 100-hour weeks anymore. I work in a small boutique firm. So overall, I live the exact life that I wanted. And we'll see what's next. But if you put all of this into perspective, this kid here could only achieve that dream outcome by being very intentional. If I had not learned the skills, and I really believe everything comes down to learning skills, life is nothing else than stacking the right skills, learning the skills, mastering them, or at least learning them to a certain extent that you need them, and then learning the next skill and progressing until you become the person you need to be or the person you want to be. And that is where this whole intentionality comes from, why I'm such a big believer in it. That said, let's dive into the how. How does journaling work? And I broke this down into 3 elements. The first part is what you will do, at least what I do, and I can really recommend doing it that way. Do an annual, at least once a year, but you can also do it more frequently. I would say not more than 4 times a year though. But let's call it an annual assessment of your values and vision and your goals. And we'll go into that in a second. Then what you will do is, and I usually focus on 90-day sprints here. So I figure out my values, vision, and then I set 90-day goals. During those 90 days, I do weekly reviews, and then I do daily journaling to refocus my intention. And we're going to get started with your values, vision, and goals. The foundation to everything, the foundation to living an intentional life is understanding your core values. If you don't understand your core values, you will never live a fulfilled life, because no matter how good you are at something, no matter how many other people tell you that, man, you have it so good, the job you have is so cool, the lifestyle you're living is so cool. If that is not aligned with what you truly value deep down, then you're not going to feel fulfilled. You will always feel like the grass is greener on the other side, unless you really live a life that is completely aligned with your values. And that is something I learned from the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I relearned it, or was reminded of it, in 2024. I can highly recommend reading this book. But I also made a video that I'm going to link somewhere here. I'm also going to put the link in the description. It is the second video I ever made where I describe the process of evaluating what you value. I would also recommend the easiest way for you to understand your values is go to Google, type in personal value assessment, and then you will find a few websites and just pick 2 or 3 of them and go through it. Now, this is not something you can do in 5 minutes. It's going to take you probably 2 hours in total, but it's really worth doing it, because by doing 2 or 3 of these tests, you will notice that you will have different outcomes in each of these tests. But what you can do then is look for alignment between the tests, and you will figure out the things that repeat themselves in each of the tests. Now, the words they use might not be the same. In one of the tests, it might say something like calmness, and in the other one, it might say something like peace. Calmness is one of my big values, and in one of the tests for me, it said calmness, and the other one it said peace, but essentially it's the same value, just phrased differently. So figure out what your values are and pick the top 5 that you think are the most important. These are your core values. Now, what I want you to do on that basis, or what I did and what I consider really the key to being intentional, is creating a vision. So really let your brain be free. If you could create a life, and let's say money didn't play a role, you can really shape it whatever you want. It's not even your life, it's a life for someone like you that is fully aligned with your values. Don't even limit yourself by telling yourself, oh, this, I have to achieve that. Just think, what would the ideal life of somebody look like, where you're like, hey, if I was in a movie, I wish that was the person I would play in the movie. That will be your vision. Really write it down. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and refine it maybe over a couple of days. Where would you be living? Who would you be living with? Would you live in a house? Would you live in an apartment? What would your day-to-day schedule look like? Would you work? If yes, what kind of work would you be doing? Who would you do it with? And get very specific on all of these things. Make it crystal clear for yourself so you can visualize it. You really want to have it down to the tiny details. The clearer you can get on this vision, the easier it's going to be to visualize this throughout the process and to intentionally refocus your energy and your mindset. And this is really something I like to do once a year, and I don't think you really need to do it more frequently. Figure out your core values, create your value-aligned vision from those core values. And then you're going to create 90-day windows. And during those 90 days, you work on specific goals towards that vision. So let's say, for example, right now you feel like you're a bit overweight. Maybe you're here like this guy, and you want to become this guy. So a big mistake many people make when they're not intentional is they're just, okay, I have to preserve muscle, but I also have to lose weight, and then it's just complete chaos. No, what you're going to do instead is for the next 90 days, your main focus with your fitness journey is going to be cutting down weight, losing weight, getting shredded, whatever you want to call it. Lose weight, that needs to be your main focus. Don't worry about losing muscle. We can rebuild. Usually the weight cut, if you eat properly, you're not going to actually lose muscle. So don't try to have conflicting goals in your mind. That is not helpful. Do that for 90 days. So write down these 90-day goals. So this is what creates the big picture. Having these 90-day goals, and what we're going to do now is the consistent implementation. This is the actual journaling part. The actual journaling starts every Sunday. Sunday is the day where you should sit down, plan your upcoming weeks. What are your main priorities for the week? Your main priorities should be the things that you want to work on or that you want to prioritize over everything else. For example, if you want to build a business, but you also work 60 hours a week, I would say it sounds like your main priority is your work. But that is not true. Your main priority should be building the business. So how do you do that while working 60 hours a week? Well, you need to prioritize it over your work, but we know you have to work, so you need to do it before. Wake up early, work on your main priorities, then go do the stuff that you have to do. The idea is doing more of the stuff that you want to do, doing less or as little as necessary of the stuff that you need to do. Then once you've written down the priorities, figure out what the main needle movers are. I just use the example of business, but let's use the example of fitness because I feel like this is something that's closer to home for most people. So if your main priority is getting in shape and you know that you also have to work 60 hours a week, how are you going to do it? Well, you need to do it before or after. If your main priority is losing weight, you need to plan accordingly. Make sure that your food is dialed down, that you meal prep if necessary, that you pick the restaurants you're going to eat when you eat by yourself. Of course, there are client dinners and things like that. have a plan. How can you implement it? This is your main priority. And what is the main needle movers? Well, if you want to lose weight, it's probably going to be figuring out your diet, making sure every morning to remind yourself to stick to your diet that day. Think about a backup plan when something comes up like a client dinner, and then figure out a way to schedule in cardio during the week, 2 or 3 sessions maybe. Yeah, figure out a way to work towards your priorities, to work towards your goals. And these are the inputs, the steps that you will do on a day-to-day basis. Really figure out what's the priority, what are the main needle movers that will help you move towards those priorities, and do you have any specific goals? That could be, this week, my goal is to do not 7.5K steps, but 10K, or not 10K, but 12K steps for this week, every single day. Write down these specific goals. Make sure that these are input focused goals, because input focused goals are the ones that are within your control. That's a whole different topic, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but focus on things that are within your control. And at the end of each week, you will review the past week. How aligned were you with your values, right? How aligned was your week with your values? If you value having fun, having freedom, spending time with family, but you spend your entire week working 80 hours a week, you will probably not feel very fulfilled. And you want to get closer over time to a life that fulfills you, to a life where you do things you want to do, and further away from only having to do things you have to do. So start writing that down. And there might be weeks where you feel like I was not aligned at all. But the goal is not to be perfectly aligned. It is to get more and more aligned over time. Did you make progress with your focus on your alignment? Did you make progress with your priorities? Did you get the things done with regard to your main priorities that you said you would get done, that you wanted to get done? And if not, why not? What happened? What held you back? And what could you have done better? Is there anything you maybe even regret? Anything you really regret? If you have a regret, write it down. Think about why it happened, what you could have done differently, what you will do differently next time. And then let's draw this out a little bit, right? This is essentially, can we do this? Maybe it's not working, but this is a cycle, right? You plan your week. You plan your week, and at the end of the week, you review it, and you plan your next week. And then at the end of the week, you review the past week, and you plan the next week. And this is a cycle, a weekly cycle. And within each of these planning sessions, what you do is you map out your priorities for the upcoming week. Okay, so you get very clear on which things are the main priorities, and that is locked in. For that week, you will not touch it. You do a weekly planning, you set your priorities, and you will not question your priorities during the week, because otherwise, every single day, you will think again, oh, what's the most important thing for today? No, you already know what your main priorities are. And sorry when I'm yelling, this is just also for myself. I'm very passionate about this because I know how powerful it is. And sometimes I fuck it up myself. But just making sure that we don't question our implementation during the week, but instead we just use our daily journaling session as a focusing session, reminding ourselves what needs to happen today. This is where the magic happens. So on a day-to-day basis, what you will do is you write down the 5 things you are grateful for from the past day. And this is key because we want to feel great about everything. We want to make sure that we feel good about our life, even when we're stressed, even when we have a lot of stuff to do. Think about the things that went well, and then think about the things that didn't go so well. Anything you fucked up, anything you regret. Write this down as well. Make sure this gets less and less over time. You don't want to live a life where you constantly regret your day. When I was really young, actually, somebody said to me, if you wake up too many days in a row and you look in the mirror and hate your life, it's time to make a change. Maybe I read this somewhere, but if you have too many days in a row where things are not the way you want them to be, then it is your duty to take responsibility and make a change. So these are 2 things that I do to make myself feel better, to make sure that on an emotional level, I feel like I'm progressing. I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful where I'm at, but I also assess whether maybe I'm not feeling satisfied, whether maybe I need to do things better. And then we come to the actual core, the thing that truly matters. and that is our daily reminder of our priorities, right? We do not change these on a day-to-day basis. We just remind ourselves of the priorities that we wrote down on our Sunday planning. We just write them down. It's just a reminder. It's like, okay, what are my priorities? What do I need to focus on today? I wrote that down on Sunday. I write it down, the same thing every day. I know it sounds boring. I know it sounds annoying. I write it down every single day. It doesn't matter. It is just to make sure that my brain is dialed in. And then we write down what the main needle movers for the day will be, right? Okay, what do I have to do today? Well, my main priority for the week is my physique. So I know today I have a client dinner. What's my main priority? What's my main needle mover today? Okay, when I'm going to be at the client dinner, I need to make sure that I don't start by eating 3 pieces of bread, because I won't have time to go training, but I also know I have to go to the client dinner. So let's make sure at least I don't fuck everything up that I did this week. So write down these main needle movers. That is what I do on a day-to-day basis. But as you can see here, I wrote down this include personalized further elements. I added this here as well, because both in your weekly session and in your daily session, you can add further things that you do on a day-to-day basis. So for me, I have a few more elements in my daily journaling that are not necessary, but that help me personally. For example, I visualize every single day what I would do in the next 12 months if I knew that I only had 12 months to live. It's only taking me 15 seconds, but it helps put things into perspective, making sure that I'm not doing things that are completely outside of what my dream life would be. And you can find these things, and this is something that will iteratively develop when you keep doing this over a long enough period of time. You will at some point think, well, actually, I should also do this, and then you just add this to your routine. The goal here is to create a journaling routine that works for you, that helps you progress. I'm just giving you the basis, the foundation of how it works, the foundation of reality bending, the foundation of creating the life you want. But it's up to you to change it, to modify it, to make it work for yourself even better. That's what I want for everybody that I work with, for everybody that watches my content. Help you become an autonomous being. In the end, just share what worked for me. You can combine that with things that you learned yourself that helped you, and create the best possible routine. And of course, if you have something you find great that you feel like you should be sharing, share it. Share it in the comments. Let other people know. Maybe somebody else can benefit. In the end, we're all in this journey together. That said, if you want to work with me, there's a link to my Calendly below. Hop on a call with me. Let's see if we match. Let's see if I can help you. And other than that, I'll see you in one of my next videos.